Welcome to the Foundry by Forge College. I'm your host, and today we're building an explainer around the actual blueprint of access control. In our previous lesson, we absolutely nailed down structuring deployment scripts. But once that contract is live in the wild, who actually holds the keys? We're shifting gears from just deploying contracts to deciding exactly who gets to pull the levers. Let's get into it. Okay, so here's our engineering schematic for this explainer. We're going to hit the access control blueprint, then 3 patterns of power and how to reduce the blast radius. After that, we'll look at real-world contract scenarios, a 5-step decision flow, and finally securing your next protocol. Let's roll. Section 1, the access control blueprint. Let's talk access control logic. Right, so we already know how to build the doors using modifiers. I'm sure you've written 100 of those require statements that stop a function dead in its tracks if the caller isn't authorized. But you deploy the contract, and who holds the keys? It's honestly a terrifying reality in Web3 that sometimes a multi-million-dollar protocol treasury is guarded by a single private key. And it's literally held by an intern who just figured out what a hardware wallet is. I mean, knowing how a modifier works mechanically is crucial, but it's not enough for secure design. We have to map out the architectural logic. Who gets single-owner control? Who needs multi-party consensus? Where do we need those fine-grained roles?
Section 2, 3 patterns of power. 3 access patterns.
Let's pull out our drafting pens and look at the primary access control designs in our engineering tool belt. First up, we've got the single-owner pattern, often called Ownable. This centralizes all administrative power into a single key or address. The benefit? Super low complexity. It's incredibly simple to set up, which makes it awesome for early-stage development. But the downside? Extremely high risk. If that one key gets compromised, it's game over. The attacker absolutely owns the castle. Next, we have role-based access control, or RBAC. This pattern assigns specific, really narrow permissions to different accounts. We're talking about a minter role, a burner role, or maybe a pauser role. Think of RBAC like handing out specialized, restricted key cards to your team instead of just giving everyone the master key. Now, it definitely adds complexity because you actually have to manage who gets what, but it significantly neutralizes that terrifying single key risk we just talked about. When you put them side by side, it's really a game of trade-offs. You have to weigh the low-friction setup of the single-owner pattern against the safer but, gas-heavier and more complex RBAC pattern. RBAC gives you true separation of concerns. Actually, think about it. You really don't want your community manager accidentally minting 1 billion tokens when they were just trying to pause the contract during a bug bounty, right? RBAC stops that kind of disaster in its tracks. And our third pattern is the multisig and timelock. This setup requires multiple managers to approve an action, often with a mandatory time delay before the gears actually turn. A multisig requires multiple parties to turn their keys at the exact same time to open the vault. It adds a critical layer of consensus. And that time delay, it's a lifesaver. It gives your community time to see a massive change coming and react to it before it goes live on chain. Moving right along to Section 3, reducing the blast radius, limit the damage. Listen, if a breach happens, and honestly, in Web3, you always have to assume it's a when, not an if, our blueprint needs to ensure the damage is contained to the absolute smallest possible area. To do that, we enforce 4 strict principles. First, minimal privilege. Give an account the absolute minimum permissions needed to do its job, no more. Second, delegation. Grant narrower authority to a specific contract instead of handing out global admin rights. Third, specialize your roles. Don't build an omnipotent admin. Separate your minter from your cat manager. And finally, limit external calls inside privilege functions. If a key gets compromised, these barriers are what keep that blast radius tiny. Which brings us to Section 4, real-world contract scenarios, real-world use cases. All right, it's time to take these abstract tools and apply them to the concrete problems you're actually going to code. Consider this your architectural cheat sheet. Protocol upgrades, high impact. They get a multisig and timelock to prevent malicious takeovers. Token minting, we use RBAC for a minter role to tightly scope the authority. Emergency stops, well, you need speed there, so an owner or a specific RBAC pauser role is your best bet. And treasury transfers, always a multisig plus timelock to guard those funds. High-impact actions demand strict consensus, while emergencies just require a super rapid response. And this brings us to a really brilliant design, the emergency pauser hybrid. You grant a fast pauser role using RBAC for instant mitigation so someone can slam the brakes immediately if a vulnerability pops up. But, and here's the kicker, to actually make permanent fixes or unpause the system later, you require a full multisig. It perfectly balances the need for breakneck speed with the absolute safety of consensus. It's the best of both worlds, for sure. Section 5. The 5-step decision flow. A rigorous checklist. As you'll learn in our Forge College courses, great security isn't guesswork. It's not about just throwing modifiers at a wall and seeing what compiles, right? It's about following a rigorous, repeatable checklist. You should walk through this 5-step flow every single time you write a privileged function. Step 1. Classify the impact. Are we altering global state or just tweaking a UI pointer? Step 2. Assess urgency. Is this a high-stakes, once-a-year upgrade or a low-impact daily chore? Step 3. Apply least privilege to break down sweeping permissions. Step 4. Plan your revocation mechanics. Basically, how do we pull the plug if things go sideways? And Step 5. Trace the access flow. Let's actually zoom in on Step 5, because trust me, this will save your protocol. You must mechanically trace the linear execution flow. Start at the entry point, trace the modifier checks, look at the state conditions, watch out for unchecked external calls, and finally review the state updates. Seriously, sketch this out on paper to spot authorization gaps long before you ever hit deploy. And we've arrived at our final section, securing your next protocol, your next deployment. Let's sign off on this architectural blueprint and get you fully prepared for your next big launch. Here are your key takeaways from this explainer. Always match the responsibility to the right pattern. Remember to balance speed against consensus. Enforce least privilege to keep your blast radius completely microscopic. Design clear revocation paths. Taking away power shouldn't just be an afterthought. And always trace your access decision flow. Security failures rarely happen because of a simple syntax error. No. They happen because the wrong person was handed the wrong key at the absolute worst possible time. So I want to leave you with this one thought. Have you traced the exact access flow of your contract's most privileged function yet? Really think about that before your next commit. Head over to forge.college to learn more about this subject, explore other Web3 topics, and join a community of builders who take security as seriously as you do. Thanks for hanging out with me on this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next